We're live.
All right. Well, hello, friends. How are you today? Good to see you again. And we're another conversation talking about COVID-19 and how that's affecting our community and what we as a city, as a state, as a nation are doing to battle the issues with this coronavirus. And today I have some heavy hitters with me, some seriously heavy hitters. I have the Honorable Congressman Bill Foster, who represents the city of Aurora, and I have the Honorable Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, who also represents the city of Aurora. How are you guys doing today?
So glad to be with you.
Well, I'm happy. I'm happy to have you here. So, you know, we're just going to start out and just having a conversation, and I know a lot of folks are just interested about what's going on in Congress, you know, in DC, and how we're going to get the stimulus money we keep hearing about, you know, on television to the individual person. How are we going to get it to businesses? How are we going to get it to municipalities like the city of Aurora to help with this gap? And I think we all know the importance of sheltering in place and staying home and shutting down, you know, all our businesses and our lives pretty much to ensure that we don't transfer this virus from one person to another. Because if this virus doesn't have a host to jump to, hopefully it, you know, it dies out and it doesn't affect people. And as a person who, you know, has been diagnosed with COVID-19, I can tell you that this is not something that I would want anyone to have to experience. So, you know, today, you know, let's just talk about a lot of things. First, I'd like you to introduce yourselves and tell the people who you are, you know, and you know, all the good work you do for our country and your districts. And it is very good work. You guys are two very amazing individuals, and we appreciate the hard work that you put in for us. But we'll start ladies first. Congresswoman Underwood, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Well, thank you, Mayor Irvin. I'm so glad to be with you today. So glad to be with my colleague, Congressman Foster. We've been on a little tour here every week. It seems we're together for a Facebook Live, and it's been fun to communicate with our community in this way. Listen, over the past few days, we've been hearing cautious optimism from our state's public health officials that we're beginning to flatten the curve here in Illinois.
Good
Our
news.
work to stay home has just begun to have a measurable effect. And it's welcome news. We're so excited about it, but we know that the sacrifices of our community has made is still being strongly felt and will be for months and years. So small business owners are in need of relief and are still trying to figure out how they'll be able to open their doors again. Essential workers are still going to work every day, fearful of being exposed because of a lack of personal protective equipment known as PPE. And even members of our community who've lost a loved one due to the virus, right? There's still so much suffering, so much sacrifice,
Absolutely.
even as we look ahead towards flattening that curve. We want everyone to know that our offices are here for you. We're taking your calls. We can connect you with resources. So definitely reach out. And CARES Act, if you want me to go into that or if you want me to wait, sir, I
Well,
can
we'll
defer
we'll
to you.
we'll 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 pick up on, you know, talking
Okay.
about different things in just a second. But
Okay.
we appreciate it. Congressman Foster, why don't you
Very
tell us a little
well.
bit about
Yeah,
yourself?
well, there's a long list of things that we're trying to make sure work properly. You know,
Yeah.
the one of the pieces of good news is that at least some people have started to get their direct cash payments. It's going first to people who filed their for their tax refunds electronically, and unfortunately, there appear to have been millions of people who did not receive them as expected. Primarily, they seem to be associated with users of TurboTax and some of the other H&R Block, I think. For some reason, there's a glitch there. We hope they sort that out. This seems to be an effort to make the rollout of the Obamacare website look good on here, but it's you know, we're doing the best we can with the situation, and you know, the payments are not universal. Not everyone gets this. It's a $1,200 per adult and $500 per child. There's a hole that I think we're going to be having to fix, is that young kids who just left the nest do not have are not getting the payment, and so this is something that it's on our list to fix when we go back to DC. And of course, you know, the payments, I think appropriately, you know, concentrate those on who need them the most, and they gradually fade out between $75,000 and roughly $100,000 for a single filer. And so this is,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you know, it's starting to do some good and getting some money in the hands of people that really need it.
Absolutely. And Congresswoman Underwood, had in your district, and what does your district cover? And I'll come back to you and ask you that same thing. What cities does your district cover, Congresswoman?
So I live in Naperville. We do have part of Aurora. Our part of Aurora is generally west of Orchard, although we do have a small little corner where the counties meet. So near Eola and Wolf's Crossing, as you head towards Naperville. So we're sort of split in our Aurora portion, and then we go north to the Wisconsin border. So we have Six
Wow.
Flags in our district. We go out west to Northern Illinois University and DeKalb as our western border, and then south to Shorewood near Joliet.
Wow. You got a big district.
Oh,
So
yes.
what are you hearing from the folks in your district about, their stimulus checks, the individuals, what they think about the $1,200 for the adults plus 500 for the kids, and whether that's really gonna help people in the long run, just one check for
Well, what we're
1,200.
hearing so much is just there was a little confusion about a week ago about who was going to get it and whether or not some senior citizens needed to apply. So now that that's been worked out, I would say that people are just anxious to receive their payments, and most folks that I've talked to know exactly how they're going to use it.
Good, good, glad to hear. And Congressman Foster, what is your district? What areas do you cover?
Well, it's the big cities. Well, we've got the second, third, and fourth largest cities in Illinois in the form of Aurora, Joliet, and Naperville.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
so it's also got a piece of Bolingbrook, Romeoville,
gotcha.
pieces of Downers Grove. It's a interesting piece of art.
Wow.
As is Lawrence. She represents a lot of the people that I represented the first go around in Congress when I represented Aurora
Before they changed the district.
2008 to 2011. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. And let's go back up to, let's talk about business resources for a second. And Congresswoman Underwood, um, businesses are struggling.
Yeah.
When we closed our doors to ensure that we practice social distancing and we sheltered in place, businesses that normally function, week to week by the revenues, people at restaurants coming and eating food, people at, stores shopping for clothes. For example, in Aurora, our Fox Valley Mall, which generates billions of dollars a year, second only to the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, as far as the number of retail amounts generated here in the state of Illinois. Our outlet mall that, competes throughout Illinois and does, gangbusters business. Our casino, we're one of the older cities in Illinois, over 180 years old here in Aurora, and we're one of the original cities to get a casino license. Now that's shut down. All these things are zero, making zero money, zero revenue, as well as our Paramount Theater, which was such a huge attraction for the city of Aurora. What are we going to do to help? And all these businesses are hurting, because they rely on people to come and shop there to function. What are we going to do with some of our businesses and help them through the federal process?
Well, during this acute economic crisis that we're in, we know that this has impacts on all size businesses, from the self-employed and independent contractors that effectively run their own business to large global corporations. And so in our community, we know that small business has been the foundation for our strong economy throughout the
Absolutely.
14th Congressional District. Everybody from mom and pop shops and those who operate mostly cash businesses to those small and medium sized businesses. Everybody's hurting. And so there's been some relief that's been part of the supplemental spending packages that we passed through the Congress. Most recently, a bill called the CARES Act. And the CARES Act passed out of the House and the Senate and was signed into law by the president at the end of March. And many of our local business owners are familiar with some of the programs that have been supported, like the Paycheck Protection Program. There's support through the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. And then there's support for the larger companies like United Airlines, for example, and some of the global corporations. And so we've been in close contact with many of our local chambers of commerce and many of our small business owners across the district. And they're hearing about real challenges that folks are facing in accessing those dollars that were made available. Everything from banks who may have been unwilling to extend a line of credit to people who didn't have a previous lending relationship, to people who just don't have the in-house capacity to navigate the significant administrative challenges that are involved in filling out some of these applications,
Wow.
to people who are just overwhelmed by the situation and just need someone to help coach them through it. And so our staff has been hard at work helping people navigate through this challenging time in these systems. And so for anybody who's watching who finds themselves in need of some support, whether it's to retain their employees or keep their operations going, know that Congressman Foster and I are here to help you.
Oh wow, that's great. That's great information. I'm hope the people take you up on that. And Congressman Foster, someone who is proud to not only be a scientist but a businessman. Talk a little bit about. And I stole that from you.
Yeah, well, the thing is,
I stole your line, brother.
yeah, well, and the problem is, when I was running the business back when I was a kid, we almost went bankrupt. I don't know how many times. I know what kind of struggle it is. And I think the biggest disaster we ever had was our company manufactures theater lighting equipment. And right after September 11th, you can imagine, Broadway shut down. Everyone canceled their order for theater lighting. And so our customers just evaporated. And so, we stared at bankruptcy, and we had significant layoffs just to try to keep the company alive. And so this is it's really rough, because we all hear from businesses that are trying to figure out a way to survive. The deal that we've tried to offer businesses large and small is, for example, for the SBA loans. They say, we will loan you money on an emergency basis with the understanding that if you keep most of your personnel and keep them on the payroll, then we will forgive those loans. Okay, and we will make that offer to small businesses, which generally speaking are businesses with less than 500 people, which are the majority of businesses in the country. And the loans are capped so that they're more useful to a small business than a large business. If you're a big enough business, even a loan of $10 million isn't going to carry you over for very long. And so they're having a hard time seeing, if this shutdown lasts for months, how they're going to keep their payroll. We've actually also really strengthened the unemployment insurance program for those who simply can't. And then there was some good news there. Actually, I think on May 11th, Illinois is now going to be offering unemployment insurance not only to people who have an established business that's going on, but sole proprietors and independent contractors.
That's great, especially for those small businesses that that have been running themselves for years. Absolutely, that's great.
Yeah, so they're going to be holding on by their fingernails until May 11th, but it's something that they can hopefully look forward to. And so this is going to be a patchwork of programs, and we hope that there won't be many cracks between the patches. And anyone who feels like they're falling through should just get in touch with our offices, and we'll either guide you to the best programs that are in place, or get a plane ticket to Washington, and in the next iteration of these, fix those cracks.
And that's very, very good news that you guys are making that offer to assist people in navigating through applying and seeing which people apply for which opportunity, because not everyone is going to, people know how to run their business, and that's what they do. They may not know how to do other things outside of what they're used to in running their small business, meaning applying for grants, applying for loans. And Congresswoman Underwood, let's go back to you for a second. We're hearing that some of these loans may eventually end up being grants if the employer maintains a number of their employees. Is that correct?
That's right. And so that's how these programs were designed. The Paycheck Protection Program was designed to be a forgivable loan, so that if a small business maintains their headcount, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the same individuals, right? Because we know that there are many circumstances through which that would not be appropriate.
Absolutely.
But that they maintain their headcount, then that loan becomes forgivable at the end of the period. And so that's something that is very important. Now, we also know that many of these small businesses are struggling with operational costs, things that are not necessarily personnel related.
Absolutely.
And so we have been trying to help those small businesses navigate that process as well. So for example, the economic injury disaster loans have some different eligible uses, that might be an attractive option for some people, although that is not that forgivable loan. And so this is, again, as Congressman Foster described, a little bit of a patchwork approach depending on the needs and circumstances that each small business faces. We know that this is an acute time, right? And so while there are some protections for people around their rent or mortgage payments, even in the commercial side, that there is going to be requirements to pay bills at the end of this process. And those kinds of companies are going to need cash flow available to meet their obligations.
Absolutely.
And so those are the types of conversations that my team has been having with local entrepreneurs to help them navigate this time. When there is assistance being made available, we're just trying to make sure it meets everybody's needs.
Absolutely. No, I owned a small business for over 15 years, a law firm. I'm a lawyer by trade before I became mayor full time. And, like you, Congressman Foster, I went through 2008 and 2009 and the ups and downs of business. And, it's scary. Had I still been out in private practice, I have no idea, how I'd be handling paying my employees and overhead and whatnot. All right, now, when you guys both gave your districts, so when people call, should they call your offices? Should they be located in your particular districts and your lines when they call your office?
Generally, yes.
We'll help them if they call and they're in Lawrence or Sean Casten's or Adam Kinziger's district. We'll just say, okay, we'll ask them their address, and there are tools you can use online, including at just the House of Representatives, where you can enter your address and it will
Gotcha.
look through all these complicated maps and figure out exactly who represents you.
Because I expect after today, after the offer that you've made to our watchers and our listeners, that folks will be reaching out to you. So if you don't mind, when we're done and we put this out, yeah, and we're on Facebook Live now, but we continue to put this out to the community about your offer, that Mr. Muhammad, my director of communications, also provide contact information that you give him of where people can reach out to you and navigate these some of these application processes.
Yeah.
We keep hearing about, and Congressman Underwood, different stimulus packages that are coming. We had the initial package. Now we're hearing about a second package and possibly a third. Can you describe what exactly that means and why we're going that route?
Sure. So in the month of March, we passed 3 supplemental spending packages out of the Congress. The first really addressed many of the healthcare needs, offered free testing to individuals who needed it. And we know that people need the testing, and then also provided some funding for the purchase of personal protective equipment and also funds to help state and local public health departments. The second bill was called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And so that one was a little bit more broad and additional support like paid leave and some of the other initiatives that we find are so very important for individuals, families, and our communities navigating this time of a pandemic. And the most recent one was the CARES Act that had so many of these small business fixes in there that we've been describing today, like the unemployment insurance expansion, the Paycheck Protection Program, the support for large corporations, the rebate checks, the $1,200 for individuals, things like that. So now we're looking ahead, because we know that there's a lot more that needs to come to deal with both crises, the acute healthcare crisis that we're facing and this economic crisis. And so the fourth piece of legislation, we're calling it CARES 2, the CARES Act 2. And so that hasn't been introduced yet, but we're working to make sure that it includes further assistance for small business. And we've been hearing that there's been a lot of interest and demand for these programs, and we need to appropriate some more money. So that would be included additional resources to process unemployment claims. In my congressional district, out of the 7 counties that I represent, at least 5 of them have seen unemployment claims go up 1,000% over the last several weeks. And so there's significant increase in unemployment here in our community, and giving families additional direct cash payments. I mean, $1,200 as a one-time payment is helpful, but I don't think it's sufficient. And
Yeah.
so we're going to work to make sure that there's additional resources being made available to families. And then more desperately needed resources for our hospitals, for community health centers, healthcare systems, and healthcare workers at the front lines of this crisis. We know that so many of our hospitals and clinics and health centers have had to reduce their procedures and their operations, really limit their ability to see patients in person, and it's really threatening their ability to remain open. And we take for granted that we can pick up the phone and call a provider. And we need to make sure that that resource, that really valuable resource in our community, can remain vibrant. So most importantly, this upcoming package needs to remain fully coordinated, fully funded, a whole of government response that the American people need and deserve. But we're not done working. So if you all have an idea, we've been in touch with your office, sir, but just our community, the residents of Aurora, you all know best what you need and
Absolutely.
what kind of help. And so we want to hear from you on how to make sure that this next package meets your needs. So don't hesitate to reach out. We're answering the phones and talking to people 7 days a week to make sure that we're able to get this information.
And just so the viewers know, I've been in contact with both Congresswoman Underwood and Congressman Foster about how they can support Aurora and our community, as a whole. And they've been very responsive and with great ideas, and look forward to helping us, eventually get back to normal as much as we can. But Congresswoman Underwood, you talked a lot about, finances and how the federal government is going to try to help, bridge this gap or fill this huge financial hole that's going to be in all of our economies. But people, and Congressman Foster, people is just as concerned about their health as they are their finances, man. And as far as testing and vaccines and anything, any kind of mitigating cures for COVID-19, can you give us a little, indication of what's going on with testing?
Well, we got the medical expert here. I mean, there are different aspects of testing here. There's the testing for when someone suspects they're suffering from it. And that's the thing that, it's been an emergency for months in this country that we don't have easy access the way they have in other advanced countries, where, countries like, South Korea very early just set up these drive-in centers, and now they're starting to become generally available in the US. But it's really, it's frustrating that if you look at the total number of tests performed nationwide, it's actually been flat for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And that is something, frankly, we're raising hell about, because it shouldn't be happening. And so that's then downstream, equally important to getting the economy restarted will be these antibody tests that
Yes.
tell you that, like our mayor, like our police chief, you believe you have suffered and recovered from COVID-19. And so that there are tests you can give that say, yes, I have circulating in my blood the antibodies that will protect me from ever being infected again, or at least for the next year or two. You've gotten sort of a natural vaccine for your for your labors or your suffering. And so this means when you have that test, then it's safe to go out in public and circulate, resume your normal life. And so that making those tests widely available will help those who have suffered through COVID-19, perhaps without even knowing it. And so getting these antibody tests deployed has been a very high, well, actually, ever since the first of these bills that we passed, we made sure that when we said everyone gets a free COVID-19 test, they also get a free antibody test.
Wow.
Very valuable. Basically, my staff drove the committee staff nuts, making sure they changed all the language and all the different parts of the bill so that it applied both to the virus testing itself and the antibody.
Wow.
And people will be benefiting a lot when they have easy and free access to these antibody tests. But you got to get our government to mass produce these and to order them. And that's been a struggle for months now.
And
If I can
Congressman
just add
go ahead, please
one
do.
thing, it's important to make sure that these tests are available everywhere. And
Why?
so right now we've seen that there's been a little bit of a concentration in certain hotspot communities, and it's more difficult to get tests outside of those areas. We've seen testing being prioritized for people like health providers, which we understand that they do need to get the access to the test. But as we look ahead towards reopening the country, right, and getting regular economic activity moving forward and giving those orders that allow people to move around outside of their homes freely, we need to know, based on the general population, how many people still have active COVID circulating in their systems, even if they don't have symptoms, right? So if they have asymptomatic disease, they can still spread it, which is why it's so important that we have the widespread testing. What we're finding right now is that vulnerable communities, underserved communities, and communities of color have not had the same access to the COVID-19 tests as other types of communities in our country, which has been a contributing factor to the disparities that we've seen in the death rate. So in Illinois, it's been in the news, it's been widely circulated that there's an extreme disparity in that African Americans are making up over 40% of the COVID deaths in our state.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we are nowhere close to 40% of the population. Part of the reason is that people didn't know that they had been infected because they didn't have access to the test. They ended up getting severe illness, and it was too late, or it was too
Wow.
severe to be able to get effective treatment. Access to these types of tests, like Bill Foster just described, Congressman Foster just described, is so very important. Same thing with the antibody test. Right? We know that there are so many people who do not have jobs that allow them to work from home. It is not in the nature of a job of a grocery clerk or a mail carrier. It's not in the nature of the job of a truck driver to be able to do that work from home. And so those individuals need to be able to get the antibody test as well to know that it is safe. And not just essential workers, but everybody, right, needs to be able to get that test to know that it's safe to be able to navigate in the community under normal type operations. And it cannot be limited to just certain geographies or certain social economic types of people.
Yep. We also have to be very careful when the testing becomes available that it doesn't become a source of job discrimination.
Correct.
And there's a very delicate issue that we're starting to talk about in Congress. Let's say there are two grocery clerks. One of them gets COVID and recovers and is perfectly safe to go back to work. The other one does not, and it continues to be a risk to themselves and potentially their community. You know, should you be allowed to tell one of them that, okay, you come back to work and you do not on a job application? You know, are you going to be allowed to say, okay, well, if you can pass the antibody test, we'll hire you, otherwise not? You know, so these are really, you know, almost science fiction type, very worrisome times. And we have to get ahead of them in Congress by having an adult discussion on this, on these very complicated issues, and not just let it come up to, you know, pronouncements at press conferences.
And relatedly, it can't be punitive, right? So that if you do have active virus that's circulating in your system, even if you're not symptomatic, we can't make the need to stay home, even once the economy reopened, be punitive. Meaning, you know, you can't be giving people fines or withholding paid leave, threatening their jobs or their ability to continue to support their families. We are literally all in this together.
Wow.
And we have to have that kind of approach in the policy making as we look ahead to reopening our society and encouraging people to go back to work.
We are definitely all in this together. And, you know, I expect that there are a number of folks that would like to ask questions about, you know, what we need to do as a community to move forward, you know, what you guys are doing, and you're doing a great job, you know, in Congress and bringing back resources to us and just advocating on behalf of the community of Aurora and our surrounding cities and all your areas that you represent. So let's see if we can take a few questions from the audience and you know, fill some gaps that maybe that had questions I didn't ask. Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think we have more questions for this conversation than the last few combined. We can take some notes. This may be a need for a part two as we go forward here. The first one kind of clears up some rumors, but also addresses what you addressed earlier, Congressman Foster. Do people have to pay back stimulus checks, or are they in advance for next year's tax refund? And then can you talk a little bit more about, you mentioned H&R Block and those issues. Can you answer
Yeah.
those questions?
Well, first off, the stimulus checks, the $1,200 plus $500 payments, they are their payments, period, full stop. You do not have to pay those back.
So that doesn't come out of people's tax returns next year then?
No.
Okay, good.
The problem is there are details of the way the bill was written that make it confusing to read. But if they're complicated rules about construction of, you don't want to know about it. But in fact, the bottom line is no, they are just straightforward payments. Don't worry about having to pay them back. The payments to businesses, the loans that are repaid if you maintain your workforce, if you don't maintain your workforce, if you don't keep your payroll, you will be expected to pay that back. And so those are a different class of payments, the PPP payments.
So let me ask a follow-up question on that. If for some reason this business does maintain their employee count, maybe not the same exact employee like Congresswoman Underwood pointed out, but the same employee count, is it automatic that loan be forgiven, or are there other criteria?
Well, there are a number of qualifying criteria to get the loan in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly will have to present proof that you actually kept your workforce.
Okay.
And I believe there's some rules, like you can't fire all your employees and then hire your wife and your cousin and stuff like that.
Got you.
That kind of rules. So there is fine print on this to make sure it doesn't get abused.
Beautiful. Thank you. Mr. Muhammad, next question.
A question coming from the self-employed community, those with 1099, the contracted services employees. What can they do? What can they do to get some relief?
Congresswoman Underwood.
So again, they are currently eligible under the law that we passed, the CARES Act, to access the unemployment insurance. There has been a delay. The delay is coming from the Federal Department of Labor issuing the guidance to the states. As you know, this is a new group of people that will be eligible for unemployment. And so there are many systems that need to be updated in order for those funds to actually be available to the community. So the date that Congressman Foster mentioned in May is when the state of Illinois is going to be making those dollars available for the independent contractors, the self-employed, and gig economy workers. Those individuals, depending on the way that they organize their business, might also be eligible for some of the small business loan programs. So that is another option that folks may want to be able to look into. And I use this cautious language around may and could, because we know that some people literally just get a 1099 and they don't have a formalized small business. And some people are truly self-employed where they have a structure, a business structure that would or could make them eligible for some of these programs. And so if you have any kind of questions around your eligibility or need help navigating these different systems, I would encourage them to reach out to one of our offices because we are able to help. Now, we do know that there has been an overwhelming interest in unemployment and accessing those dollars, so much so that it has exceeded over the last several weeks the capacity of the state of Illinois. So we've gotten a lot of outreach from people wondering if there's another way to sort of work around that system. We know that the governor and his team have been working hard to correct those kinds of technologic issues and increase the capacity of the website. And so we're encouraging people to continue to reach out to the Department of Employment Security, IDES. That's the name of that agency in the state of Illinois. And then if you have continued needs, certainly we're here to help, as are your state reps and your state senators, of which we have a few that serve the community in Aurora.
Thank you.
Next question, sir.
Yeah. This week, both of you, Congresswoman Underwood, Congressman Foster, put out a call for more direct funding to small and mid-sized cities in future relief packages like Aurora. Can you explain what that call is for?
Congressman Foster, you want to start that off?
Sure, yeah. Well, first off, there was some confusion in terms of the total allocation to states. There was special language that allowed large cities above 500,000, which in Illinois means Chicago, to receive the money directly from the federal government for the state and municipal relief, which means they got it more quickly. But every dollar that went to Chicago counted against the Illinois total. So it really wasn't extra money for Illinois because we have large cities. It got subtracted out. It was just a convenience for large cities. But the real thing that, frankly, we're in ongoing discussions, which is a polite way to say them. The same way that the Representative Underwood said that they were getting outreach from some of their constituents when they were unhappy with how the website was working. She's so polite; it's just wonderful. But this is a big, it's a really important fight that we're having with the Senate. The Senate believes that municipalities, perhaps if they had extra expenses associated with COVID, that those should be reimbursed. But if you saw a revenue fall, no, just you're on your own. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Many states and municipalities cannot run a budget deficit, in their bylaws or constitutions. And so, and you can't really reasonably expect, a municipality who's seen their revenue just fall off a cliff to have a path forward. And so, I hope we win this fight. But when you see that, they're fighting in Washington, we're not fighting over nothing. We're fighting over the fiscal survival of towns like Aurora and smaller towns throughout the state and the country.
And Congressman Underwood, if you can follow up on that, the reality is there are a number of states that don't have cities over 500,
That's
over
right.
500,000, many states, and as Aurora is the second largest in the state, and we've got, close to 1,200 cities. And if we don't get the stimulus, of course, those smaller cities own the stimulus. So can you expound on the importance of making sure that, cities under the 500,000 also get that stimulus?
Listen, the purpose of government is to do work for communities. And right now, our local governments are being impaired in their ability to offer critically essential services to all of our residents because of the COVID-19 crisis. Decreased revenue, increased pressure to have additional resources being made available since so many families have been impacted. And so it's really become urgent. Listen, in the 14th district, we have a real range in the size of communities that I represent, really teeny tiny communities like Lisbon, Illinois, and Kendall County that has like 100 homes in the whole city, to Aurora being the second largest city in the state. And so we have to make sure that every type of village or community is able to get the funding that they need to serve their residents. And this is critically important. The other thing that I just want to add is that there is a bit of a geographic element to COVID-19 and the way that it's been spreading across the country. The state of Illinois has been really at the forefront with COVID, right? We had some of the earliest cases in our country. We were the first state to have in-state lab testing capacity. And Governor Pritzker took early decisive action in order to protect Illinoisans from this disease by issuing the stay-at-home orders and pulling the kids out of school. There's so many states in our country that have not felt the same acute healthcare crisis and who may not be feeling the same type of economic crisis. And so as a result, when we think about legislative bodies like the United States Congress, people are coming from everywhere and they're responding to what they're seeing in their communities. The fact remains that so many places are a little bit like a couple weeks behind us. And so these issues that we're grappling with here, the conversations that you share with me, sir, and with Congressman Foster about the acute budgetary needs in Aurora and in so many of the other communities here in Northern Illinois, some other places are a few weeks or even a month behind in really coming to that realization. So I don't doubt that that funding will be made available. It's the timeline through which it becomes available. And for us here in Aurora, we can't wait. We need these resources now. And so that is why you hear Congressman Foster and I fighting to make sure that this money gets included in the emergency spending bill that the Speaker is negotiating with Secretary Mnuchin, with President Trump, and with Senator McConnell, that it needs to be included in whatever spending gets approved this week Because if
Absolutely.
it gets approved next month, that might be too late for Aurora. It might be too late for the state of Illinois, given the outlays that we've already made to date. And so, just a little bit of a background for our listeners to understand the politics of this. It's not that there's just this huge disagreement, it's that some people just haven't seen it yet, the way that we all have experienced COVID
Gotcha.
here in Illinois.
Gotcha.
Thank
Jake.
you. Question from a group of landlords who are saying they're really trying to work with their tenants. They're giving rent breaks. Another month is coming up, May 1st. Is there anything that you can see in your district or even nationally that gives landlords some relief? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the $1,200 payment should go up, frankly, and continue. You know, the simplest solution to that is to have people who are renters have enough money in their pockets so they can at least pay part of their rent. And so, you know, we fought hard to get that $1,200 negotiated to a higher number, and we'll continue to do that. Because it's, you know, it's a very different scenario if this shutdown of our economy lasts for 6 months than if it lasts 2 months. And so, so we're going to have a hard look at that. And then there's some landlords may qualify for various forms of business assistance as well. And that depends a lot on the structure, whether it's just someone who owns a house and they're renting the top floor to someone, or whether it's a large multi-family commercial property.
That's right.
And so there will be some assistance made to those range of commercial entities, and that's being hashed out as well.
Thank you. Then final question, I know we're coming up on our time here. Looking at Census 2020, amid COVID-19, you know, of course, things have been suspended from an outreach standpoint nationally till June, we believe, and we're taking ours digitally in Aurora. Can you share with the community how important it is still to complete that census and its direct connection to funding, like you've been talking about for the last 45 minutes or so?
Congressman Underwood.
Well, I did my census on April 1st, and it was easy. And I just went online, typed in my code. It was 10 questions, and everybody should do it. Listen, I know it's not something that people get excited about. Fine, but you need to do it. And so don't wait. Go through that stack of mail that we all have sitting on our counters. And in there, I guarantee you have a couple letters from the US Census Bureau. Do not put it off. There is so much at stake with the census. And while we're all at home, particularly those of you that have enough internet access to be able to watch us on Facebook Live right now, you have everything that you need to do your census. And it's not going to take that much time. Literally 10 questions, no more than 10 minutes. And it's just about you, your residents, where you were living as of April 1st this year, and who was living in your home. The key is don't leave out any children that are in your life. We know that the largest group that is chronically undercounted in the census are kids under 5. And the impacts of the census are not just felt right now for a month or for a year. It's for the next 10 years, my friend, 10 years. And so we need to make sure that our kids, those cute 2, 3, 4-year-olds in our lives, get all the benefits of our community for the next 10 years to come, which means that they need to be counted so that we are eligible. The city of Aurora is eligible. Our school districts are receiving all the funding that they should, so that our community can get the resources that we need.
Yeah. And the U.S. Constitution says that we count people. You know, we do not count citizens. We do not count taxpayers. We count people. And so if you or anyone who shares the household with you is not documented, that doesn't matter. Please fill out the census. There are very strong protections against that data ever being used by ICE or anyone related to that or any other purpose, in fact, and strong criminal penalties if that data ever gets leaked. So it's private data, but it's very important that every household records every member who is present and living there on April 1st. So it's really important. There's also the possibility that we may extend some of the deadlines. That's under negotiation, you know, simply because of COVID-19. But you know, the quick thing to do is to do it online. Do it in the next 10 minutes. So just, you know, kill your Facebook tab and open a new tab and get it done right now.
And there's help in other languages. So if English is not your primary language or your first language or your preferred language, don't let that be a barrier to you from filling out the census. There are instructions and other supports available in Spanish and other languages.
Thank you both. The Mayor, we have so many more questions. We'll relay them to the district staffs of both of our Congress folks here. We'll turn it back over to you.
You know, I want to thank both our Congresswoman Underwood and Congresswoman Foster for joining us today and answering a lot of the questions. I mean, we call ourselves Aurora Strong here, you know, in our city, and we're Aurora Strong through and through. Right now, we're stronger at home, so we can help each other to address and fight COVID-19, this coronavirus. So we can, you know, stop it from jumping from person to person, host to host, and beat it and you know, hopefully kill it off by following the rules of our health officials. We have both a scientist and a person that works in the health field here. So I know you guys understand, but I'll tell you what, Aurora is also stronger because of our representatives, and you both representing us in Congress also make Aurora strong. So we appreciate both of you joining today on Facebook Live. We, as Clayton pointed out, we had more questions in this one than we've had in you know, the other ones we've done in the past, because people are interested. They want to know what's going on, you know, with Congress, our federal government. They want to know about these stimulus checks we keep hearing about. They want to know about, you know, a vaccine, you know, or some mitigation for, you know, the, you know, health concerns we're dealing with, and you guys are on top of it. So thank you. And I don't want this to be the last one. Although this was the first one, I don't want it to be the last one. I want you to come on again, but I appreciate you spending time. Thank you, friends, for joining us today. The Honorable Congresswoman Lauren Underwood and the Honorable Congressman Bill Foster. Thanks for joining us. Bye now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.